Okay, let's call the meeting to order of the Albany Finance Committee. And the first thing is to do a roll call.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bowman?
Present.
Chair Priven? Member Papalia?
Here.
Member Trainer?
Present.
And Member Kerr is absent.
Okay. Next, we have the land acknowledgement. Is there someone who would like, I think you read it last time, is there someone who would like to read the land acknowledgement? You two look occupied.
Oh, I can read it.
Yeah?
Read it?
Sure, go for it.
All right. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lisjon. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home.
Thank you. I don't think we need to read it, but also we have the committee purpose written here under the call to order. Second item is approval of minutes. Any comments?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Okay. Motion to approve. Vice Chair Bowman?
Yes.
Chair Priven?
Yes.
Member Papalia?
Yes.
And Member Trainer?
Yes.
And Member Kerr is absent. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Next up is announcements. So let's start with staff.
First announcement, we have an exciting week, not only due to the flooding, but also our audit team is on site. We are currently undergoing the interim audit. We started to receive testing items last week from the audit team, so we've been able to turn around their requests fairly quickly. I think as of this afternoon, we've submitted everything requested over to them. So it is running fairly smoothly, and yeah, going well so far, feeling good about it.
All right, we have I have a couple of other announcements as well, but I'll just echo that we are pleased with the audit team that's here on site with us, and we're working well together with them, and I think we are much farther ahead than we have been typically at this point in the process. So great start for a year in which we're hoping to really push forward the improvements we need in the accounting and auditing end. So that's exciting. Second notice, and we'll talk about it when we get to the budget item, but just an apology that the wrong attachment got uploaded. Gremlins in the computer system, so you were sent the revised attachment, and that's what we will be have available for the presentation. The summary was all in the staff report itself, and that was correct. It was just the attachment that was wrong, so I apologize for that. And then finally, an update. It seems like it was a long time ago, but that's, I think, because we haven't been together for quite some time. The city was poised for a final interview for a finance department department head. That fell through, and so we did not end up with a successful candidate out of the first recruitment. In order to maximize the pool, we are going to wait a few months to redo the recruitment, so we have a hopefully new set of people in and out of the job market, which typically happens over a 4 or 5 month period. We will relaunch the recruitment and hope to have someone on board toward the end of this year or January of next year. I will be staying through that time as your interim finance director. I am, as you probably all know, limited in the amount of hours I can work as a PERS retiree, but the hours reset on July 1st, so I'm available. So I will be here more or less full-time through the end of the year. So I'm looking forward to continuing some of the work that I got started and didn't think I was going to get to touch again, but here it is back in my lap. So I probably should be careful what I wished for, but I'm looking forward to it. So a little disappointing, but onward and upward toward hopefully a really positive recruitment later this year.
Was on that position, was there something from City Council last night or something, or no?
There was an item on the agenda last night for the City Council, not directly related to the Finance Director position, but Albany, unlike many, many other cities with a council manager form of government, our charter requires that the council appoint department heads. It's really quite unusual for this form of government. Councilmember Jordan brought forward a proposal to bring a charter amendment to the ballot this November that would align hiring authority for department heads with the city manager and not with the council, more typically for how that is handled in cities that have this form of government. So that should, assuming it all went forward, the goal would be that it helps streamline the hiring process and might, anything we can do to speed up the process. It's often very competitive for, particularly for department head positions. And so the city's ability to pivot quickly can be important in sometimes making those recruitments successful. And the council has, full confidence in the manager to handle that. And over the last 8 years, I don't think they've ever turned down a recommendation that the manager has made. So that was the reasoning for bringing that forward. So it would apply down the line potentially to a department head position like the finance department.
Okay, thank you. Any other announcements? Nope.
Yes.
Oh.
No other announcements. I'm
No
sorry.
other announcements. Okay, let's go to public comment. Is there anyone from the public online? Nope. Okay, then let's go to item 5, presentations. Fiscal year 24 Q3 budget.
Thank you, Chair. We're, of course, as usual, working out the specifics of the technology, which is always fun. One of us, between Cassie, myself, and the city clerk. Where's the PowerPoint? I'm not going to find it. I have plenty to tell you, though. So, as I mentioned, apologize for the attachments being, that one attachment being incorrect, but this is the third quarter budget review. As you may have noticed in your packet, the continuing to try to work on the presentation of information to incorporate comments that had come from that KPI subcommittee as well as the committee as a whole, and the information that I'm looking at. And so we continue to try to improve it each time. It means it changes a little bit each time, but hopefully we'll land on a format and a process that really is more meaningful and easy to understand as we go forward with that. So in the third quarter, we looked not only at where we were year to date, but also where we project we will end the year. So that's based on estimates from our own analysis. We have, for example, a sales tax consultant that helps us understand sales tax trends, so we get estimates on sales tax from them. Other things that we know that are going on that may affect the budget between now and the end of the year. Revenues in the projection are slightly better than budgeted. Really, not so much in many of the major taxes, but we did have some additional revenue with the UC agreement that was signed, and it wasn't included in the budget because the timing was backwards. The budget got adopted and the UC MOU was done just after that, and so we weren't able to incorporate it in the budget. So it comes in as an unexpected revenue for '24. It will be, we will amend the FY25 budget to include that. So we will kind of catch up with our own paperwork with when that MOU was signed. Expenses are projected at slightly under budget, which is great. So revenue's a tiny bit over, expenses a tiny bit under. That puts us in what we think will be a pretty close to even, maybe a little bit under position when we do finally hit year end. Which is significantly better than the position that we thought we would be in when we adopted the budget, which was we thought we might have a deficit up to $1.3 million. Now we're looking at, it says $40,000 there. One of the things that I want to really drive home for the committee is that's an estimate. Please, that's a really small number, and so we could be 50,000 below that, we could be 50,000 above that. That's our best estimate, but expect that number to change. Do not expect to see 38,590. If you see 38,596,000 when we complete the audit for '24, I'm going to stand up and ask for a bonus. It will be a miracle. It won't happen, but just so you know, our best guess is that we are in better shape than we thought we would be when we adopted the budget, and that's really the bottom line. Sales and use taxes, a little soft, which we were not surprised at, and we know that will continue to have some impact next year, especially with the loss of Golden Gate Fields. The other big change in what you see on the year end, but also with the third quarter, which you can really see on that transfers in line, is after a lot of conversation both with the committee and with the council on the kind of confusing nature of transfers, we have updated our process so that we calculate and move those transfers on a quarterly basis. That was a catch-up in Q3. So that we get a better sense over the course of the year as to how we're going to trend on those. We still think we're going to be under budget on those, but you now have a much better picture of where that will be compared to the budget itself. But that will help make it more clear kind of where we are over the course of the year. On the expenditure side, there's really not much to say except that departments are doing a good job in trying to manage their expenses. The biggest savings are typically in vacant positions or programs that didn't ramp up as quickly as we thought they might. There were a couple of public works programs that we think were slower to get either positions filled or get rolling on some of the maintenance pieces. So those budgets won't be fully expended. But you can see that, some budgets are more under than others, but I think we're in pretty good shape for '24. And really now we're focused on, so what is this all going to look like for '25, right? So in a hot minute, we'll be back with you on June 5th to talk about the potential FY24 and FY25 adjustments. I don't expect there to be a lot of adjustments, but there are a couple of key categories for '25 that we need to adjust for things that have changed in the last year. So the bottom line is we're in decent shape. We should just stay the course, and we'll probably end FY24 in a better than budgeted position. and we'll see kind of where those numbers fall out. It is our plan this year to complete the audit before the end of December, which would be much earlier than it's been the last few years. The goal would be either to bring it in December or to bring it first thing in January, sort of depending on when in December it gets completed. But with the work that we're showing now with the interim audit and some of the other improved procedures that we're putting in place, I think we're on track to be able to have that year-end, true year-end number a lot sooner than we've had it in the past, which I think will be very, very helpful for us. And then before we know it, we'll be rolling into the beginning of the next biennial budget. So it feels like there's a really long runway before that would occur, but it's a surprising, it will go by very quickly. And then just as I said, a reminder that this is all estimates. It's based on our best education and analysis, but things can and do change within a quarter, and so stay tuned. There may be some variations from this or variances from this that we see, but I feel pretty comfortable that we're on track for a pretty stable year, which is a really nice feeling to feel like, okay, I think we're okay. And that is it for my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any?
Yeah, I have a question. I know we had quite a bit of discussion on the transfers in line item last time, and my memory is a little bit foggy, but I thought I recall us saying that we were going to catch up in that in the second half of the year. Did something change with regards to that? And can you refresh my memory as to like what it is specifically?
So it used to be that we did transfers in primarily once a year at the very end of the year. So you didn't see anything, and then whatever happened. And so what we talked about is how can we either acknowledge that we're not going to do them until the end of the year, and then don't bother telling me that you're at 2% of budget because you expected to be at 2% of budget because you were going to do it at the end of the year. The alternative, which is what we've implemented, is we are going to do those transfers on a quarterly basis, and then in the fourth quarter we can true up for any actuals that may be different than what we anticipated in any given quarter. So you can see in quarter three, under transfers in, there's almost 2.9 million, which was us catching up from all of the quarters that had occurred so far. So this includes transfers from many of the special funds that are involved in our public works activities. So the Landscape and Lighting District and the Parks and Open Space bond, not bond, but the Parks and Open Space tax and all of those kinds of things that we typically waited, and now we're doing those on a quarterly basis. So that's why you see that we're now at, 4 million, or 3 million, to date, and we expect to be at a little over 5 million at the end of the year. We're still going to come in under, but that's a question of, I think, looking at how we're estimating those on the front end rather than a failure to achieve a goal. I think we've been perhaps overstating those transfer amounts, and now we'll be able to capture those more accurately.
Yeah,
So-
I was looking at the chart. If this is the same document, there's like a bar chart on the next page that says I think I'm looking at the report.
He's looking at the actual report.
But we budgeted quite a bit more in transfers in this year than we actually had in actuals in 2023.
Yeah, and I can't tell you exactly what led to that. I think there's, because I wasn't here at the time the budget was put together, but I think that got overstated in the process of estimating it for the budget, and we will look at that for 25 to some degree, but absolutely for the next biennial budget.
And then,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
So I'm going to try not to get too technical on transfers in, so ask me to repeat or clarify. So transfers in are budgeted according to expected expenses, especially when it comes to public works and the programs that they run, because there are revenues that are slated to be utilized for specific uses. So the way that we're calculating the transfers in to date on those programs is we're utilizing the actual expenses spent for those programs and using those special revenues to refund the general fund. Does that make sense? So if we are under budget in expenses, the transfers in also are less to the general fund. That doesn't mean the revenues themselves are down. They are just not in the general fund because we cannot utilize them if we don't expend in a category that that revenue is allowed to be used for.
Are those program budgets part of the expenses that are under budget that were reported on that previous page? So those expenses are under budget, and therefore the transfers in will be under budget as well?
Yeah, so the Public Works budget specifically has quite a few transfers in because their programs are allowed to use the special revenues. And so if they are under budget in street trees or sidewalks, et cetera, that means the transfers will be down in their operating budget because we're essentially replenishing the general fund with the revenues that are allocated for that use.
I have another question. I love the estimated column. So helpful.
Second that.
And I was scrolling down through the estimated column, and if you can switch back up to that page that shows it, I noticed that the earnings on investments estimate is the same as the Q3 number, and I'm wondering if that needs to be bumped up, or is there some reason why it's the same? So it's 681, 115 is the year-to-date.
Yes. So one of the things that, so this is the first year we're coming up on a full year of having an investment advisor and professionally managed the bulk of our cash. And one of the things that gets reported to us is unrealized gains and losses. And in some of the earlier numbers that were pulled, we were pulling that unrealized number as well. And so it skewed the numbers. And so when I was pulling the numbers for this, I took the most conservative approach possible because I didn't want to overstate something that turned out to be an unrealized gain. Because you can't spend an unrealized gain. It's like it's not real money, right? It's something that if you sold at that moment, it would produce that gain. So that needed some more refining, and in order to take a more conservative approach, I just left it at that third quarter number to make sure I wasn't overstating something that was an unrealized gain and wouldn't be seen on a cash basis by the end of the year. And so that will get updated for the fourth quarter once we work through with our investment advisor exactly how we should be capturing those amounts. It's a translation from what the investment advisor sends us, which you have the investment reports, how we book it in our accounting system, some of which, and I'm a budget person by nature, so accounting stuff, I know some of you are accounting people. There's some stuff in there that it's not real money, right? It's like I can't go out and spend my unrealized gains. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were not overstating that and that we're keeping a conservative approach before we hit the end of the year.
Okay, so the 681,000 includes unrealized gains?
I don't think it does anymore. I think I scrubbed those, but I wanted to go back with the investment advisor and didn't have a chance before we published this.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to look at how the earnings accumulated. So there was 197,000, then 207,000, then 276,000. And Do you have a sense of why it was sort of increasing over the quarters like that? Was that due to the interest rate increases that the Fed was pushing through along during that period of time, or was it something else?
It's not so much that, it's that over the course of that time, more of our money was being managed directly. So we moved money in to CAMP, our investment account, in July. So the first, they started managing our money, but, if we assign them $30 million or whatever it is to invest, they don't invest all $30 million on the first day. And so I think over time, they were able to continue to move investments forward and fully invest that amount, and then we're starting to reap the rewards of that. What you saw in the first quarter, they only had a portion of the funds invested. So we were still getting what are pretty good returns because of the interest rate hikes that the Fed has done. So even our money market account for the investment company is at 4.5% or 5% or something. But over time, as they were able to pull more of the funds into actively managed investments, that's why I think you see that continue to increase. And we will have the advisor here, I think in October, for a much better explanation than I can. I gave you my best understanding of the markets, but they will have a much better understanding of the markets.
Okay. Well, that's really helpful, and if that does represent just sort of earned income, interest, dividends, gains, then we could potentially look forward to another couple $100,000 of income, which would
And that would be great.
put us into a small surplus position.
Yes. Again, my approach to both the revenue side and the expenditure side was to take a conservative methodology to estimates, which means actively not overestimating revenues and actively not underestimating expenses. Oftentimes there is an uptick in expenses in the fourth quarter because departments are trying to get all their stuff done before the fiscal year ends. And so I accounted for that in that projection number that shows up in that estimated year end. So it's not just a pure straight line, but looking at how departments have typically, how their spending has moved over the course of a year on a annual basis. What does that look like? What programs and projects do we know that the departments are working on, so that, for Public Works, took a pretty aggressive approach to thinking about how much more they might spend in the fourth quarter than, 1/3 of what they spent in each of the prior quarters.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Could you remind me again of what the transfers where they're coming from?
The transfers in are coming primarily from special revenue funds. So this includes things like the pension tax override. That gets collected and deposited in a special fund, but all the expenses are spent out of the general fund. So we transfer it into the general fund. So that's a transfer in from the pension tax fund, 1,002.
How many funds are there?
So, pardon me?
How many of those kinds of funds are there?
I should be able to do this in my head. About 10-ish. So there's the pension tax is one of the biggest ones, but the landscape and lighting district, there's the 2006 street storm assessment. There's a 2018 parks and open space assessment. Those are Those are among the bigger ones.
That's okay, I just.
Or those
I
kinds
would
of
like-
things.
It would be nice to have a list of those.
Oh, yeah.
At some point.
They are listed in the budget.
Right. So, I am delighted to see that you are transferring the funds in on a quarterly basis. Was wondering, I mean, you know, I'm new to this. And it was just, well, that's the way it's done kind of thing, where we transfer money. And it was always confusing, but maybe not to accountants, but to me, they were. So is there any, so from now on, will we expect to see transfers in on a regular, you know, as spent? I mean, is there any reason not to, well, we're gonna spend, or that much was spent, so we transfer it in? Right, so that it always looks, you know, so we're not seeing these fluctuations that can be confusing to me.
Just an FYI, is your mic on when you're talking and
Right.
member trainer?
Mine's on.
Perfect, okay, just a little closer to the microphone.
All right,
Will
thank
be
you.
excellent for our technical folks. So my understanding of the rationale for doing it once a year is at the end of the year, you know exactly how much you're supposed to transfer, so you just do the transfer once and you don't do any other calculations, and it's simpler. And from a fiscal year perspective, that makes perfect sense. But it doesn't help you over the course of the fiscal year to see any potential trends. And so it was a perfectly reasonable way of doing it from the perspective of streamlining the calculations because they only got done once a year. It's a bit more work to do those calculations and the journal entries into our system on a quarterly basis, but it does help us understand how things are going. And so that's why we made the change when as the questions came up. And there's always the opportunity in that fourth quarter to true things up if something changes that we didn't anticipate. But in the meantime, we know that, we should be on track to reach those transfer in numbers. So I think it was done for streamlining purposes on the production end, if you will, but this gives us some additional data that we didn't really have before.
And I did just want to add that the special revenue and enterprise funds are starting on page 174 of the biennial budget. That's where you can find the lists of them, what they're utilized for, and I believe it'll also show.
The transfers.
Yeah, the transfers that are budgeted from those funds for the fiscal year. So,
The reason why I'm mentioning all of this is that one of my goals since I got on this committee was to make this whole process easier for the general public to understand, and the less that is unknown or unexplained, and there's this big differential, we go, oh, well, why is that going on like that? Then the easier it is for not just the public, but I think the council will be able to take in the whole budget a lot more easily. Regarding the other items, in the loss in the sales tax revenue that we can expect from the Golden Gate Fields closing could be approximately how much?
180,000 per year.
Okay. The current, the amount of money that UC was going to put in to, that was decided upon, $400,000 a year, what was that supposed to cover? And was it, in particular, is it supposed to cover the services that will be required for when the new units of graduate housing open?
So the The 400,000 is intended to be a sort of catch-all contribution for the additional impacts that will occur as that continues to build out. It wasn't ever, intended to be, the 400,000 didn't get built by like, okay, it's 30,000 for this and 50,000 for that. It was, a more generalized estimate. And so, yes, in general terms, between the MOU and the normal, if people who live in that housing are shopping in the city, they're generating sales tax for us, and, so population growth can have some positive revenue impacts. But the MOU is a bit of a catch-all because of the property tax implications of publicly owned land, like UC-owned land. So that was how that was structured. There is also in the MOU a separate contribution of $200,000 per year for 10 years, which is really targeted at potential fire equipment that may be needed to handle the higher story buildings. So we're still trying to work through what that's going to look like, but that is a separate piece of that MOU and is not included in here because it's separated out as an equipment reserve. It'll be an equipment reserve. It's not into the general fund.
Going to be a transfer in? Another transfer in? No, okay.
No, because it's going to sit there and accumulate to pay whatever equipment costs or financing costs. But the 400,000 is just deposited. It doesn't transfer in from anywhere. It just comes, we get a check, deposit the check in the checking account, we're good.
So there's 400,000 a year for how many years?
10,
And then the fire thing is an additional,
200,000 for the same 10-year
so
period.
it's $600,000 a year of revenue stream that UC will be giving to the city for 10 years.
Correct. The 200 is
Yeah.
somewhat segregated. It doesn't flow into the general fund, but the 400 does.
But it goes to pay for the services, and so
Yes.
that's my interest is if, do we know how many units will be supposed to come online from the new?
Not familiar enough with the development to know that.
Okay, and the MOU was, who negotiated it? Memorandum?
Some folks from UC, and I suspect our city manager's office and attorney's office.
That was done in June of
I
something?
want to say the MOU was signed in July or August. Cassie's looking it up, but it was right in the same time frame. So the budget gets put together in May, gets adopted in June, and I don't think that the MOU is on the agenda until later. We can find I had the exact date, but I don't have it.
Okay, now, with the changes in the utility users tax, am I correct that we can expect an extra, or a total is it of 800,000 a year? Or it's,
Yes.
800,000. So that taxes, the water one was, that's going to stay the same. So the utility users tax is the tax that we voted on for the ratepayers to pay in, and so that would bring in an additional $800,000, the new rate.
Correct.
And that all will go to the general fund, but a small amount of it may be, or around 111,000, a third of the 333,000. That's what I have in my notes. can be used for climate action?
So and Cassie has it up on the presentation, the ballot measure was passed as a general tax, 50% of the vote. That means that the funds can be used for any general fund purpose. The ballot language also stated an aspiration that a third of the funds would be used, a third of the increase would be specifically targeted for climate-related expenditures. Now, some of those occur within the general fund, and this money is paying for it as part of the general fund. The council did in May of last year set aside $143,000 of the first year's, about a third of the first year's additional revenue for specifically into a reserve for climate-related activities. The council will have that same choice about whether or not to formally segregate those funds when the FY24 audit is complete and to see where the overall general fund numbers are. But if the funds just flow into the general fund, and if there's a need for and a council decision to just spend them in the general fund, then they'll be spent in the general fund. But there is this aspiration to push forward with climate.
Got it. Now, the savings from the 2 to 9% below budget driven by vacancies, I believe, were those, how much of that was generated by the police department? And are you aware of how many vacancies still exist with the police department? Because those are the,
Thank you.
I mean, so in the past, we were told that the budget included the money to pay for a full number of positions.
Yes, correct.
And the police department has not been able to, since we've been here, to fill those positions. But it gets budgeted every year. And so I'd like to know how many positions are still vacant, because that would be part of the budget that would be then budgeted for 24-25.
So I think police is getting fairly close to being fully staffed. They have been making steady progress. They may still have some vacancies. We do budget for filling all positions that are authorized, so the budget does include the dollars for full staffing. In some cases, in departments when there are vacancies, particularly police and fire, their overtime costs go up because they have to cover at a particular level. Unlike, finance, they just, I'm not there, I'm not there, stuff just doesn't get done. No, I'm just kidding. You don't earn overtime the same way you do for police and fire, and some public works activities, which really have to be staffed every day for, safety and operations. So I do think police is getting close to being fully staffed. We can find out how many vacancies they still have.
Isn't that the most expensive, basically, is regular position?
Police and fire both are much more than pretty much all of the other, average department
Our fire
positions.
department is fully staffed?
Fire is fully staffed. So what happens when, we build the budget, we say, here are all our positions, here's what it would cost if we can keep everybody fully staffed. If departments aren't fully staffed for the whole year, then those salary costs, if they're not required to cover overtime costs, are savings to the budget and just fall to general fund balance. And they, we start over again the following fiscal year. We don't carry over anything.
The point I'm trying to make is that when I last mentioned something to the chief, there still seem to be significant vacancies with the police department. And so if we are expecting to be on budget, we're not, it's kind of an illusion of being on budget because we're budgeting for police protection that may or may not be there, and yet, because they can't, I mean, there's only so much you can do with overtime, I believe, and therefore, the money that we're saved from these vacancies are covering the budget deficits in other areas. So how do we anticipate properly in the future? How do we make a budget? I mean, if there's going to be this continuing vacancies, which seems to be endemic to the entire area, problems with the police being able to fill the positions is because it's hard to find candidates that are willing to work in the Bay Area and have to live here, right, and pay for housing. I think that's one part of it, but not the whole reasons.
Right. So, I mean, what you see is that with the exception of general government, which has some extraordinary expenses associated with insurance and some other things that came in higher, and that there's not as much staff in that line as there is in all of the other departmental lines. But you can see that almost every department is below budget. So everybody's got some vacancies or programs that, you know, didn't get fully implemented in the year, or other areas in which they've saved. And so, you know, every year when we build a budget, we do our best to say, here's what we think it's going to cost, here's what we think the revenues are, and here's what the relationship is. Now, if we know that we're always going to have vacancies, should we be accounting for that in the budget and not fully funding 100% of the positions because we expect there to be turnover and they're not going to need that money, they're not going to be able to spend that money. Maybe that's something we're talking about. Similarly, on the revenue side, you know, we need to figure out, you know, where's the appropriate level of, you know, how conservative, how not conservative, how well do we understand what we think our economic situation is going to be. And so, you know, the budget is our best estimates at the beginning of the year about what's going to happen for a whole year, which is a really long time. And so, you know, if there are vacancies, for example, as you're pointing out in police, is that paying for other things? Not really, because all of the departments are, it's not like police is saving money and it's covering other departments' costs. They're just not fully expending their budget for a variety of reasons. And the reason that our budget is almost balanced is because we're doing about what we thought on the revenues, but all the departments are under budget. And so, you know, this is a picture that says, okay, well, what do we think is going to happen in '25? And then what do we think is going to happen in the out years?
You can see a trend with police and fire where you can tell that they have been able to staff up, because actual fiscal 22-23 expenses were $7.3 million for police, and we're estimating we'll be at $7.8 million this year. So that's a $500,000 increase, but it's still under budget by $335,000. So that's 2 or 3 positions probably. And it's, you know, I don't know what they're paid and benefits and everything, but it can't be that many open positions.
They're much closer to being fully staffed now. I know that the chief has talked about that.
And on the fire side, you can tell that that one is fully staffed, because when you were showing that other breakout page, the salaries were like dead on, maybe even over by 1,000 or 10,000 or something, and their other expenses were under budget by 200,000. And that's where fire is under budget. So there was something that they didn't spend, but it wasn't salary in the fire. So it does seem like the trend line is they're doing well, at hiring these additional open positions, because in years past, I think that those open positions were making up $1 million or maybe more dollars of budget deficit, and we were ending up with surpluses because we were $1 million under in police and fire. And now that's 542,000.
Except for when we calculate overtime. So if they're having to pay police officers overtime to fill the vacancies, which I still believe are significant, being better means instead of having 4 out of 24 being vacant, we could have 3 out of 24 being vacant. That's an improvement, but it's still a significant understaffing. And then you have to pay all the other police officers more money to cover just some of the hours, and I don't think that the hours are necessarily covered. I mean, it would be nice to get a little more insight into how the positions are being covered, how the time slots are being covered, because they have to do, and if they're just doing a minimum during some periods of the day. Because, I mean, I still never see any police officers where I live in town. They seem to, and I think it's because they're having to use their time elsewhere.
So
Can I just break in for a sec? With everyone's indulgence, I feel like we've talked this one through. Is that okay? I mean,
yeah,
we've got some other.
Sort of outside the scope of.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it's a big issue that affects the budget. I don't think we have any answers right now. I think maybe in the future we could talk about having just some simple staffing. What's the staffing number? What was in the budget? Would that help you?
I will have a conversation with the police chief and get back to us. Okay.
Okay. Any other? Any other questions on the?
One last question. Sorry, apologize. Where in the budget, is it anywhere in the budget where additional monies were spent to pay down the unfunded pension liability?
No additional funds have been budgeted beyond the required UAL contribution and then the regular normal contributions.
And so I have, it's not so much a question, but maybe a comment to bring back to the investment people when they come in October. I guess in my simple mind, if there's 30-something million invested and everything's earning 4 or 5%, even if it's in a money market, I'm expecting well over $1 million in investment income, 1.2, 1.6, something like that. So I guess one question is why the number this year is so much lower, and I realize it wasn't all fully invested, but even if it was in a money market, it should have been earning. So I just want to understand that. I'm not expecting an answer, but when they come in October, I really that's a question for them. And then when you're working on the budget for next year, I would expect that number to be higher, just because, again, even if it's only 4%, I would expect it to be some gain there. So anyway, just a comment. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, they're showing about 290,000 in interest earned for Q1.
Yeah.
So, that would annualize out to 1.2 or whatever, roughly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe it was the ramp-up period of not being fully invested in those early quarters, the first 2 quarters.
Right. I hope so.
Yeah.
We'll find out in October. Okay. So with that, let's move on to.
You might want to see if there's anybody in the audience who would like to
Any public comment?
participate or anyone online.
Thank you.
Nope. We have no public speakers, so.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, you are welcome to move forward.
Okay, so let's move on to, I think the next is the investment.
So really, there's no major presentation intended for this. We have the last two quarters of investment reports from the investment advisor, and there's a description in each of the economic outlook and what the Fed thinks they're going to do, et cetera, as well as the performance of our own investments. And as I said, this fall we will have the investment advisor come and make an actual presentation, which I think will help illuminate any questions you have, including questions about like, hey, how, what are we earning, and where's that money, and making sure that we're definitely getting that the bang for our buck. But other than that, no presentation, no action required by the committee, just for your information.
Okay. Any comments on these to take back to the investment advisors for their? Okay.
Public comment in case
Public comment on the
anybody wants to.
investment reports? Okay. So now we're on to 6.2 or 6-2, which is the committee effectiveness. And I think the goal here is just to kind of have a conversation about where we are as a committee, how we're doing in terms of supporting city council, which is our primary task, and really what is the scope of what we ought to be working on. I know there was some questions about what if we should be involved in staff decisions like the finance director and so on. And so this is really the time, I think, to just sort of talk about what we're doing as a committee, what's our scope, and how we can most effectively help city council. So I know I've had some conversations with folks, but I'm interested to hear.
And Cassie has some kind of overview comments, which
Okay.
will help set the stage for this. So if you will indulge us, that would be great.
Which, thank you for getting it rolling. I attached 3 items to this agenda piece to kind of, again, get the ball rolling, introduce the topic, which you did a great job of, because the committee has expressed an interest in discussing the effectiveness of the committee and how members can best support city council within the council-approved scope of the committee. So the 3 attachments I included, first is the resolution which established the committee. It's Resolution 2020-12. This is the resolution which established the creation of the Financial Advisory Committee. The goal of council in creating the committee is to create a further enhance independent oversight and financial transparency. The committee is to advise city council on financial matters. These matters listed in the resolution include, but are not exhaustive to, budgeting, audits, long-term financial planning, and the financial sustainability of the city. Committee is also to review non-administrative finance policies, and is tasked to review and make recommendation to City Council on a number of financial tasks. As this has been kind of an ongoing discussion with the committee during meetings, so staff has explicitly included the Financial Advisory Committee comments in the City Council staff reports. We started that with the Quarter 2 budget review, the fiscal year 23 audit, and the allocation of the SSB tax. Including the FAC comments was at the request of the KPI subcommittee, and this does further aid in the communication between FAC and City Council. I also attached the advisory body handbook. This provides information to advisory bodies across the city, which includes the role, conduct, expectations, training information, and more. Page 6 does discuss the role and the function of advisory bodies. Again, primary role of advisory bodies is to provide recommendations to City Council related to policies and programs within that advisory body's specified scope of responsibility. I also included, and I'll spend a little more time on this one ahead of the discussion, the advisory body training slide deck. This one is an outline from the training that occurred in March 2023. It is a pretty decent summary when looked at alongside the advisory body handbook. I would definitely recommend review as the staff liaison. I know that I'm going forward, review this as well as the advisory body handbook. It's good to just keep it maybe bookmarked somewhere, just to have referenced and kind of refresh your memory, because there are, a lot of rules that maybe you don't keep front of mind without review. The advisory body training, there are slides there on the Brown Act that were prepared by Albany's legal counsel, BBK. And so it's starting down here at page 7. And this kind of gives an overview of the Brown Act, which is a complicated act, to say the least, and kind of goes into the intent of the Brown Act. This is that the intent of public commissions, boards, and other entities exist to aid in conduct of the people's business, and that their actions be taken openly and their deliberation be conducted openly. So that's kind of the basis of what this act was initiated for. Financial Advisory Committee is considered a legislative body, so this is why the Brown Act does apply. And on page 9, slide 6, there we go, discusses meetings and what constitutes a meeting. First, gathering of a majority, so what is occurring this evening. The second thing, and this is where you need to be cautious of complying with the Brown Act, is the serial meeting. A serial meeting is any series of communications between multiple members of the Financial Advisory Committee to discuss, deliberate, or take action on an item of business that is within the subject matter jurisdiction. So this is, again, broad overview. And then slide 7 actually gives kind of a nice little visual representation of what a serial meeting may be. So there's the chain and the hub and spoke. So one committee member speaks with another committee member who then relays that message to another committee member, or there is interaction among multiple committee members one at a time, is the hub and spoke. I did also want to clarify some items that have come up in prior meetings, how committee members who are not participating as a part of the committee, how they can relay information. First, public comment is not allowed. Their committee members are not members of the public, even if they're not participating. But a committee member may email staff or a single member of the committee to read their comment during the public meeting. So staff, we've confirmed this was an item we were unsure of in the past. If staff does receive comment from the committee member, we can read that alongside the agenda item. And the committee member can designate a single other committee member, relay that information to them, and they can read it on their behalf, but only one committee member or a member of staff. There is also the no action information, no action allowed, and this is part of the Brown Act that covers agendized items. So items that are not on the agenda are not able to be discussed aside from brief responses or clarifications arising from public comment, requests for follow-up from staff at a future meeting, brief announcement, reference, or report on one's own activity. So this is why we try to say we must stick to the agenda outside of brief comments or rein in when the scope kind of deviates from the agenda. So that was it, just a few things I wanted to roll over and some talking points before turning it over.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that reminder. I know I needed that, even though I went to the Brown Act training. It's always good to get refreshed. So again, this is just a chance to kind of sit back. I know I have some thoughts, but I'm interested to hear how people think the committee's functioning, and again, how we can support City Council.
It's my comment, and this is kind of related to what we did last year around this time, was we had our own study session of the budget, which I think is the one that will be happening on the next meeting. And then a couple of the committee members went and spoke to the council about the budget. And I felt like that was maybe one of the more impactful communications that we've had, because we appeared in person to speak with the council. And I feel like that is sort of a more effective way of doing this, and that if we have things that we really would like to put forth, I think, for their consideration, it'd be nice to actually be able to have a few minutes of council time to present those things. And I know that that's been a little complicated in the past in terms of like making sure that that's something that's on their agenda, or I'm not sure exactly how you get that done. But, you know, we have a lot of deliberations here about the pension, the unfunded pension liability, and just revenue sources and things like that. And so, in my opinion, I think the going and, you know, having someone represent this committee and speak to the council that's effective.
And is that as an agendized item or public comment? That was an,
That was an agendized item.
Okay.
Where we were given time to
right?
speak about the budget last year. So I guess that I'd like to see us do that again,
Yeah.
if possible, to speak to the council about our, you know, our views and comments about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's not that we're passing a budget this year, but it's sort of an update.
Right, so much less intensive process this year. Our presentation will just be on budget changes. There will still be an opportunity if the committee wants to speak at that point, but that's not going to be a major budget item. That will occur the following year, and I do think that it was valuable for the committee to present. So I went back and watched that presentation that you made. Somebody else spoke.
Judy and you were there too. Yeah.
But you know, for the council to hear that in person, I think can be helpful in the context of that study session. We will have on June 17th the actions for any budget adjustments. So just for your information, that's when it will go to the city council for the any FY24 and FY25 adjustments. That's scheduled for that meeting of the 17th, but it's not intended to be a major chunk of the agenda. It's a very packed agenda as the last one before the end of the fiscal year.
I agree with that assessment. I think that was one of the more impactful things that we've done.
Is your mic on? Are you close
Yeah,
to
it
the
is.
There you go.
I think that was one of the more impactful things we've done. Something else that I like that we've come up with is ensuring that the Financial Advisory Committee discussion is included in the budget reports and in the annual report, and especially when we get to the end of the year. I think one of the goals that we had as the KPI committee was to comment on a few things like budget, pension, general fund, and capital reserves, and we should make a point of actually doing that and putting that content in there, especially if there are things that we feel like we actually very much need to convey, whether it's actually part of that report or drafting a separate memo is I think the other tool that we discussed, utilizing when there was a specific point that we wanted to get across and emphasize to the council.
Thanks.
So how do you propose, what's the best way to structure a meeting to get the comments, having someone to go as a representative or to do a memorandum? In other words, I think in the past, we were left at the last minute trying to figure this out. Well, should there have been some planning ahead of time about how to do that? so that, for instance, if you wanted to bring something, a memorandum to the council, you'd have to you would bring a draft to the meeting that then we all discuss, and then we can make a motion on it and have changes to it. But it's either, it may be helpful to actually have something in writing ahead of the meeting, even better as an attachment, so that then the public could also see it, as well as all of us.
I think we discussed that sometimes that's not always possible, given the time constraints that we're operating under. So, one outcome was having Cassie and Raina basically summarize the discussion and the report itself. And the other was we could potentially delegate to members of the committee to draft the points that were discussed and send it after the fact with the committee's blessing. And we can talk through specific language during the meeting that we want to ensure is included, and there's an element of like trust and delivery that happens after the fact.
And if someone was to go to speak before the committee, that should be chosen by us, or the chair would be the responsibility of the chair, perhaps, most pointedly, or not?
Different committees, I think, handle it different ways. If you know, well, you'll know June 5th, I'm trying to keep all the dates in my head. June 5th is the next FAC meeting. You will see a preview of what will go to the council on June 17th. So you will have a sense in that meeting how you want to communicate to the council. And so as part of that item at the FAC meeting, you can select someone to be the representative or two people to be the representatives at council, or decide to do a delegation and a memo. You'll have that choice, but that would be the point at which the committee can make that decision and have it in effect essentially for the June 17th meeting. The one other thing I would add is that the idea of having something, potentially that a committee member might send to staff and ask to be brought forward, so it could come to a discussion for the whole committee under the Brown Act. You may want to start thinking about that late this calendar year as to, is there something that you want to preface some of the council discussions on the next biennial budget, thinking ahead, if you have those conversations in, I'm just going to name months, it doesn't have to be these months, but if you have that conversation in December and then it can come back in January or February and you can make some decisions, then you are ahead of the workshop or study session, I believe that our council would have on the budget. So just think about those things as well. As the kind of the shorter term ones that may turn around between something being presented at the FAC and then directly the next meeting at the council. But think ahead to the whole budget process, and we can make sure that we are trying to identify kind of the next key steps so that the committee can do that thinking ahead about when they might want to further engage specifically with the council.
Well, there was a specific thing that happened when I saw that there was going to be, actually, my neighbor informed me about a special closed session of the city council to choose a finance director. So I had to find out about, and she asked me, well, what's happening? And I go, no, and I had to go online and find it. And I was disappointed that we weren't even notified of this. So at the last minute, I tried to get other members of the committee to be aware of it, because it was a closed session, so we can't participate, but we could send a comment on it. But unless you knew that, you wouldn't be able to do it. So I talked to Judy Kerr about it, because that was the one person I kind of talked to, because we're in the same committee, subcommittee. And then I tried to, and we both sent in letters, and I was trying to figure out a way to communicate to the rest of the committee, did you know about this? So I hear Raina's shaking her head. So like that's not I can't believe that the intent of the Brown Act had to do with that. It'd say, no, we don't want you doing that. I mean, if you brought up what it said, the intent of the Brown Act is to have, to create, it's supposed to make government better. That's what I wasn't asking anybody to share my opinion, to do anything, but to be aware of it. So are you saying that there is no way for us to make other members aware of something that, or like, for instance, there was a tax measure that was on the ballot, not on the ballot, that they wanted to impose on property owners. They never went to us. They never even, it was never brought to us. And I had one information that from one city councilor said, well, we didn't need to because it was not a general fund tax or something like that. That's what the councilor said, or it wasn't important to do that. So how do we communicate, how can staff or the chair send out messages to the group that would be appropriate?
Haven't we before been advised that if there's something like that we'd like for the whole group to know, we're supposed to communicate with the staff liaison, and then that person, Cassie, could send out something saying, oh, there's, this is happening if you want to attend the meeting or whatever. You're allowed to do that, right?
That is an excellent way to handle that. It avoids any potential problems with the Brown Act. The nuance, so staffing decisions, finance director position, are not within the scope of the committee. They are within the scope of the city manager and the city council, very clear. And so there really isn't necessarily anything within the committee's jurisdiction that would have brought forward that director candidate for discussion, et cetera. But being aware that there was a closed session on a person that you may be interested in, if you bring that to Cassie or to myself, if you can't reach Cassie, we can alert the rest of the committee. But you sending it out to the whole committee just runs up against the Brown Act. And so the best way to handle it is to ask your liaison to make the committee aware of that information.
So that's excellent. Okay, so to me, there's kind of two issues. One is communication and one is our scope. So in terms of communication, I feel clear now that it goes through you. If there's something that I want or anybody wants the committee to be aware of. But then the second thing is, just to be clear, the scope, because we had, the scope of the committee does not include staffing really at all. So we could write comments, any of us could write comments to city council about our opinions about the job and the description and the right person or whatever, but it's not really coming from the committee. Is that correct?
Correct. So you are a member of the committee. You are not a member of council. So you, as a and our city clerk is online, so she'll smack me if I get this wrong. You are able to comment as a member of the public to the council.
Right.
You cannot stay home for whatever reason, miss one of these meetings, call in, and be a member of the public. You are never a member of the public with respect to this committee. You are a member of this committee, whether you're participating or not, whether you're here or whether you're virtual. Period. End of discussion. That was a clarification that we just got.
Okay.
So that's why we're kind of harping on it a little bit, because
Okay.
we're trying to, fully make sure that we get that. But you are not a member of council, so you are absolutely able to speak your own mind in a comment to the council. But don't share it amongst your colleagues on the FAC, because it runs up against what is within your subject matter jurisdiction. The staffing decision itself is not. It's not within the scope of the committee. That's solely the area of the manager and the council, but you are involved in financial affairs, and so you just run right up to that line. And so asking staff to make everybody aware that that was on, is a way to handle that. The other thing I would say is, as we plan to go through the recruitment process again, I'll have a better idea of how that will flow, and we can try to do a better job as staff of anticipating the timing. I didn't realize it was going to go to closed session that quickly after the interviews, and so it just kind of, I kind of found out on Friday or Monday, whenever it came out in the agenda. So we can also try to do a better job, again, of helping anticipate things that are coming that may be of interest to the committee, even if they are not directly within the subject matter jurisdiction.
Okay. I feel clear. Do you feel?
Well, the comment that I sent to the city council regarding that wasn't about who to choose, but to make sure that they were aware that their job as a liaison would involve us, because, and where we might be of items of concern. Cassie, I sent something to you about that letter. Did you post it or attach it to anything?
Which letter?
The letter that I sent to the city council regarding the finance director. I emailed it over the weekend. So you never, I didn't get any acknowledgement of receipt.
I don't think we got anything.
So number one, and I'm delighted, Raina, that you're going to be here till the end of the year. Okay? I really am. And so, but in this interim period, I've just kind of been communicating with Cassie, because even as you said, you were made a bit
She's the liaison.
She is a liaison. Okay. That wasn't clear, because I thought the finance director was the liaison, and
Not anymore.
Cassie was helping the finance director. Did you
Cassie
all
is the
know
liaison.
that?
The liaison.
Yeah.
You sent an item yesterday at 5:30. I did miss this. I apologize.
But let me just add, the comments that I think you sent and that committee member Kerr sent, the council did receive those. So that communication was successful, and the city manager also received those and, acknowledged it, and I think had some conversations. So I think there's the, two things: anticipating places where there are items of interest to the committee, things like a finance director, and trying to get ahead of those from a communication standpoint. And then the second is, if we don't do that and you see something, you let Cassie know so that we can then let the committee know. But again, in terms of the staffing decisions, it's not going to be within the committee's purview. So,
I understood that. I mean, I'm not trying to choose the director, just have them be aware of where we're at, what we're trying to do. Or then specifically so that when they're hired, they know who we are. Because they should know and not come in cold to this committee as the finance director. Well, I guess, so it's clear now that Cassie is the liaison.
she is.
And we should send communication to her that we would receive communication from her, and she would notify you if there was some question or something like that.
Yes. And because this is a letter to city council, we wouldn't have posted it to this agenda item as it's not related to this discussion. So regardless of it being sent, if you can as well, if you can send things earlier, it would be helpful, especially we're going through an audit, and I do apologize for missing this. However, this would have likely been a discussion with clerk and Raina, and I don't think it would have been attached as it's not relevant to the discussion.
It did go to council.
Well, okay. It's related in the sense that I was trying to illustrate to the rest of the committee, so they still don't know what was, what was said. It is public information, okay? As you've designated, you told us, it was posted on that agenda item on the closed session. So it's public information. It's not it's not a Brown Act violation to share for them to know about that. If it's related to an item on our agenda. I was trying to just make it clear and not try to let what I had done as part of the effectiveness that we can be, how we do this, and now that's why we're having this discussion now, is how do we communicate? And I had to kind of do that on my, I'm going to repeat, at the initial information that I got from a neighbor who said, do you know about this? Or tell me about this. And I should have known, and I think you've acknowledged that if you had known, you would have let us know.
I think we can do a better job of kind of catching those things and anticipating, right? So
I think we're clear on how communication works. I feel like we're clear on how staffing is not part of our scope, but we can individually make comments about it to city council. And I just want to back up. I mean, I really want to just talk about the committee in general rather than, in addition to this other conversation about how we can support city council. I mean, the fact that the city council considers revenue items, like you mentioned, there was a bond or a tax.
It's a ballot measure.
Or a ballot
Put on
measure.
the ballot.
Yeah, so things come up that city council considers that, don't come to us, which is fine, but it illustrates to me that maybe we could be a better resource to city council. If those are things that we think we could be helpful with. When I look at what we've done over the last few years, first of all, we learned how city financing works to some extent, which was a big lift for me at least. And we've helped out with a lot of policies, investment policies, and other things. We've helped, interview and choose an investment advisor, which I think is working out really well for the city. We've made comments, we've reviewed audits, we've made comments, we've helped with clarity, with the KPI and sort of transparency and highlighting things that we think are important. And we've raised the red flags on pensions. We've, explored a lot of areas of potential new revenue. So I guess the question is, we're taking on all these things, and it's not clear to me that they're all of similar value to city council. I definitely think communicating directly with city council about, about sort of the budget and year-end type things on the KPIs, and I'm sure pension will come up in that context as well, are very important. But I guess where I see the city headed in the next few years, I see, some real budget issues coming up with lost revenue from various sources. And I think that the way we can be most helpful is really to augment and continue with the stuff that you and Member Kerr were doing in terms of enhanced revenue. I think that was a really great direction. And probably most concretely, the thing that would really help city council and the city the most. I'm interested to see if other people feel, not that we would stop doing this other stuff, but I feel like that's really where I'd like to see us spend the majority of our time, or at least, more of a focus than it has been in the past as a group. I'm interested in thoughts on that, or if people feel like, if any other people have talked with, members of the public or city council about what they think.
I haven't spoken with any members of the public, but I do feel that in the early year to 2 years of this body, of this committee, that it was sort of advised about the budget after the fact. And then last year, that kind of changed, right, to where we got to give our comments before the budget was approved. And I really do like the suggestion by Raina that we start to put on our agendas early, like December, January, in this time frame, the things that we feel are the high points that we would like the council to take into consideration as they're forming the budget. Because we know, we can see down the road that these UAL payments are going to grow to $5 million a year or something like that, and it can change all the time, right? But we know the number will get a lot bigger than it is now, and if we're projecting budget deficits already without even factoring in the UAL payments doubling, to me, those are the comments that we need to start making, is that we have to stop deficit budgeting, because we won't be able to do it. We've got the general fund reserve that we're required to keep at 25%, and I think we've kind of done the math on that 1 year of a 1 million plus budget deficit is going to take us down to that 25% target number. So I guess I'd like to start formulating some sort of big picture ideas of we have to think farther ahead than 2 years.
That makes sense.
I think it's important that we remind ourselves and the public the reason why this committee was formed. It's because as a charter change, we voted to remove the city treasurer from the administration. The city treasurer was a finance type director person who was responsive at the ballot box to the people. By taking that away, the council, at the same time, in their wisdom, said we should form a committee whose job would partly replace that responsiveness to the public. I take this very, very, very seriously. Our job is to protect the public's concerns and that we let them know that we are their watchdog, in a sense. Because the city council has dozens of issues that they're dealing with, not just the budget. Okay? we focus on budget, financing, income, pensions, and if we don't show our expertise and insight on fiscal matters as prominently as possible to the city council, they may miss it because they're thinking about all these other things. And that's our, if you put, that's why the committee was formed in the first place. So I would like us to, in order to us to be more effective, that we take to heart our job as watchdogs for the public. So that, and the second thing is that when it comes to the unfunded pension liability, that if we put it forth in a very forceful way that we want the council to make hard decisions about it, we give the council what I call cover to actually do it, because it's going to require some hard choices. And same thing with the budget deficits. If we say, you got to take care of this A, B, and C, and our profile gets raised at those meetings, then they can say, Finance Advisory Committee, who's been looking into this issue for years and years, has brought this to our attention. We should address it. And they're not the ones coming up with the hard answers. They have to come up with the hard solutions, decisions, but at least they're not having to be the point person, and that's our job as the watchdog for the public.
Yeah, I think I echo everything you just said. I think that goes back to ensuring that when we have a point that we really want to make, it's done and it's actually heard by the city council, whether it means it's going to one of the meetings or we're putting it into a memo or a message that we are assured is going to actually reach them. And that we're selective when we, about which messages that we're sending in the first place. So I think those are things that are some of my takeaways.
Okay. That sounds good. I'm hearing that we need to really plan ahead a little bit and have some more maybe direct communication with City Council in terms of what we see. But I guess I would add to it, I would encourage everyone to talk to City Council people about how they're using us and how we can be a resource to them. Because I think we have a lot of expertise and energy on this group. And I just want to make sure that they see us as a resource. Okay, next.
I saw Judy raised her hand. Can she comment
Here's
or not?
the quirky thing. No, she is a member of the committee. She is not allowed to participate as a member of the public. That is a clarification that is different from what you have heard from us in the past. And so I apologize that it feels awkward and not nice, but we have been advised that no, she cannot participate as a member of the public in this committee.
And being out of the area at the time of this special scheduled meeting, non-regular scheduled time, she can't participate virtually.
Remotely. There are only a limited set of circumstances under which a particular member can participate remotely. Essentially, they're versions of emergencies. And so simply traveling and being out of town is not an emergency and doesn't qualify under the legislation for authorization to have them participate remotely. So if it was going to be set up for her to participate remotely as a committee member, then she'd be participating as a committee member, but not as a member of the public. So,
Okay, and if she wanted me to, I could not read, if she sent me an email on a specific, or any, you know, because she's not here, I mentioned about an item on the agenda, I can't read it. Or can I read it?
We would encourage her to send it to us and let
Right.
staff read it. But
Oh,
she
okay.
can pick
All right.
one member, one and only one,
No,
no
no, so
serial
she-
meetings, but
So she
staff
can't
members better.
speak, but she could send an email that you can read.
Not like right this instant, you know, as she's
Right, but I
participating,
mean,
but in advance, I'm not going to be at the meeting. Here's,
my comment on item 6.2. Okay.
But didn't she do that?
she did.
So is that, she followed the protocol, so is it possible to read her comments, or is that not allowed?
So her comments got posted to the agenda. And so they are available. If you want to, I mean, I guess you're welcome to bring it up.
Can you put it on the screen?
I think so.
Thank you.
Assuming I don't have somebody telling me I shouldn't be doing that. Please hold a moment while we work that out.
The public comments were added to each specific item as requested. We'll go to 6.2. Haha, I learned. So these are the collective items. Most of these were covered either by other committee members or during the presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Also reiterate, either a committee member and not the entire FAC as a whole.
Are there any public comment on 6-2? Anyone online? Okay, thank you. Let's go to 6-3, subcommittee updates. I don't think we have anything on the pension. That'll be quick. Okay. Revenue subcommittee?
No, but I hope to have something for the 5th.
Okay. And API?
I just have a question. You know, we have the quarterly budget review that we just went through. Is it in 3 months that we expect the annual report, essentially? I guess it would be August, or we're off in August, September?
Yeah, so the, quarter 4/fiscal 24? I'm sorry, we're in that period of time where it's like audit and next year and all the years running together, apologize. So yes, we would be bringing the fourth quarter / year-end analysis in whatever the first meeting is after the summer break. And then obviously it would be further refined after the audit is complete.
Got it. And the reason I'm asking is that one, I think it has the additional elements of here's what the general fund balance like projection is, here's what the liabilities are. So I'm just putting that on everybody's radar. In addition to the budget, those are the things that we wanted to focus on and comment on in terms of the financial health of the city.
Right. And we will try to incorporate those into that fourth quarter report to start bringing forward sort of that the emphasis that the KPI subcommittee and the committee as a whole was interested in. So we will try to accommodate those in that report.
Awesome. That was it.
Another question on how to do things. If we have standing agenda items of subcommittee updates, correct?
Correct?
If there is not a specific update from that committee, subcommittee, can fellow members ask questions about that? Or make a comment about it, or do we just have to wait until?
Asking
Mention.
questions about something that didn't get discussed? I think I must have missed something in what you asked.
Well, for instance, the pension subcommittee, I have something to say to them. But they're not having a report, so I can't really say anything to them about it. It's not on the agenda, but their update is. So if they say that there is no update, then I can't really ask a question or not.
You can ask a question, and in the sense that you can say, I see you don't have an update. I have a question on XYZ. It would be great if you could have a report on that at the next meeting. So it doesn't get discussed in the meeting where you raise the question,
Yes.
but the subcommittee now has heard that maybe there's something for them to discuss further.
I mean, that might also fall under just future agenda items, right?
Yes, you can, so you could say, pension subcommittee, I want you to look at, I was going to use a bad example, so I won't use pension obligation bonds, but I mean, you could say that, and then the pension subcommittee could go off and say, that is a terrible idea, or whatever they would say thereafter. But you couldn't then start a conversation about pension obligation. I'm not a fan, so
Not to put words in our mouth or anything.
no pension obligation bonds.
I think I'm allowed to say at least this part. I would like it if the pension subcommittee discussed the formulation of a 5-year or a 10-year plan during the fiscal year 2024-25 to address the unfunded pension liability. So an actual plan. I could say that, right?
You just did, and you can.
And I wasn't violating anything.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
And if the revenue subcommittee, if you have any things you want to tell us about what you think might be good sources or new sources of revenue, you could tell us, Judy, me now, and I will discuss it with Judy before June 5. Do you have any suggestions or sources? Okay.
Is there any public comment on 6-3? Nope. Okay, future agenda items. The next meeting I know is pretty full.
Next meeting will be FY24-25 budget adjustments, annual review of the investment policy, which is a standard item, and there are just the information about a number of the annual reports that go to council to set the different tax rates consistent with the ballot measures that put those tax rates in place. The council has to take an annual action on those. So we have our CPI numbers now, and so all of that. Oh, and the master fee schedule. So your next meeting is robust.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
also, I think what I heard from the discussion earlier today is that if we could make sure that in our November, December meetings, we're talking about the 25, 26 biennial budget. We're getting ready for that, those planning sessions, and so we're having that conversation, so we're ready for that. put them on those months.
Yes. And the investment advisor is coming, you said that already, right?
In October or something, you said, I think, yeah. Okay. Any public comment on item 7? Okay, next meeting is Wednesday, June 5th, 7 o'clock. Here in our newly non-flooded offices. Any public?
Thank you.
Any public comment on next meeting? No? Okay. And we will adjourn.